Welcome to another Monday Mindset Moment. I am your host and the lead coach of Raising Our Resilience, Vanessa Callahan, and I'm here to support parents with the hardest thing about parenting right now. In case it's your first time joining us, these are questions that we gather together from topics that arise when members join our free Facebook group. So if you're hearing this, you're either watching it on YouTube because it's been published in our newsletter, or you are here in the Raising Our Resilience parent group on Facebook. We have over 1,000 members who are dedicated to raising resilient kids as they also raise their own resilience. So we're going to dive into some questions, and I'm looking forward to supporting each and every one of the people who have been selected for this month, for this segment. Listen in, find things that you can relate to. And as you're listening, if something stands out to you, pop it into the comments, pop it into the chat. Let us know. That helps us to gather our learnings and also get a sense of what's been most valuable to you as participants. On Zoom, I've got Kirsten, one of my smart, big-hearted clients who's working with me in the Family Foundation's immersion this year. Kirsten, welcome. Also from the Bay Area, California. Glad you're here. And then we'll have folks also join because it's live streaming on the Facebook group. So say hello if you're in the Facebook group. It's the only way we can know who's here. So without further ado, let's get started. So the first question I'm going to tackle, let's see, it comes from Kaya Jackson. Kaya would like to know this question about, managing screen time and junk food. She has, they have 3 kids, 2, 5, and 6. So Kaya, it's good to know that because it gives me a sense of, what age group, what sort of developmental group and band your kids are in and what they might be struggling with in particular. So first of all, lucky you, kids under 6, there's a lot more that you can do in many ways than you can with kids as they get older. And I say that because I want you to know that there's a lot of hope here. It's not too late to set the tone. And it's never too late, but I think you have a really good opportunity here at 6, 5, and 2 to set the tone. So Kaya, of course, it's always more helpful if I can hear exactly what you've already tried. So please forgive me if I mention things you've already tried. Hopefully I can at least give you maybe a little spin on those, another angle to take it, or maybe even something new today. And that goes for all of the questions today. So when we're talking about managing screen time, first and foremost, I think of this as sort of in the healthy boundaries pillar of my 7-pillar framework. And it lands there because what we really need to figure out is what we do want for our kids with any boundary that we want to create. What do we want them to experience? So we want them to maybe experience a healthy relationship with devices and media consumption. That could be like the bigger goal. And then I always like to ask, well, how would you like that to look? And so maybe it looks like when they need to separate from the screen, they have an easy time with that, or an easier time. That when there's empty time, there are other things that they want to do besides get onto screens. And perhaps they can spend time self-occupied without having to involve screens. Just drafting out some common goals that I've seen for parents of kids your ages. So if you know what you want, and then you can start to build towards it. And then not only that, you can stay clear and steady on a path. You can also, of course, be descriptive about what you don't want. And you don't want them to depend on screens and or junk food, for example, to manage their emotions, to occupy themselves, and to end an argument, right? So it's like, okay, fine, here's your screen. Those are maybe some things you're trying to avoid. Those come easier to most of us. But what I want everyone to do, and what I have all my clients do, is take some time to describe what you do want. Because then when you're in the moment, you can really paint a clear picture to your kids and also stay strong and steady so you have solid ground to stand on about why a limit exists and why there might even be consequences attached to the limit, why they don't get full access to screens all the time, etc. I've definitely want to caution you from just telling kids that screens are bad for their health, or that it will ruin their brain, or that they will, some negative consequence of screen time at this age. that's typically not enough to motivate young kids, and their brains sort of don't believe it. And here's a little science behind that, which is that when kids have a chance to relax into a screen passive listening or receiving of something, some kind of form of media, like they're watching a show or something like that, they do get a reward reaction from their brain, a little dopamine hit, a little bit of happy chemicals that release into their brain. So when you tell them screens are bad for you, and then they're sitting there and they're experiencing a dopamine hit, it doesn't quite go together. Now, we can still educate kids on the potentially negative side effects of too much screen time, or of associating screen time as their only coping tool over time. I think at your kids' ages, I would stick with knowing what it is that you want to create and being clear with that so that you can follow through. Another thing, so tactically, what does that look like? People always say that I have a very hands-on practical approach. So here are your hands-on practical steps. You can come up with alternative activities to screen time that really are engaging and engrossing, but don't expect them to figure out what they are on their own, and to get busy with those activities on their own, and to stick with those activities on their own at first. But just think right now, if you could make a list of 3 to 5 things that when your child does get into a groove with it, that they can stick with it for a pretty extended period of time. Now, the 2-year-old, maybe that's 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes would be a really long time. 5 and 6, you may be looking more into the 20, 30-minute range, or maybe even an hour, depending on your child's temperament and their, kind of tendency to stick with something. Think right now, make a list of those activities, 3 to 5 activities. And I want you to start rotating those into their daily routine, where you kind of workshop through how to make it as easy as possible for them to engage in those activities independently. So what you might end up doing practically, tactically, strategically is identifying what those things are and putting them in a place in the house that's organized and accessible. Or like every Montessori teacher, for example, knows that if they put those high interest activities on a tray, on display, on a shelf that kids can reach and put their hands around and bring to a place to play with or work with, that the kids will naturally engage in the environment. And your kids are absolutely in that age range. So I would be playing with that part, wondering what are these high interest activities? How can I make them more accessible to my children so that they can self-direct and engage and get going with these activities themselves? Another thing I'd be looking at is there a way to refresh those activities so that you can rotate them on and off the shelf, so that there's something new and interesting? Maybe once a week, there's something you bring out. Maybe it's a new art supply in the same art kit, but you swap out the watercolors for some pastels or something like that. Recently, I had a 9-year-old over at my house who's been in my life for many, many years, used to be a part of my household when they were living with me. And so I was kind of a bonus adult, and still am when we spend time together. And I've got this rainbow scratch paper, it's all black and there's rainbow underneath it. And it was so sweet because she's so used to finding things to occupy herself with when her mom and I are catching up in my house. So I would rotate and do different things. Last time it was like magnet construction set. Time before that, it was, watercolors. Time before that, it was something different. And so I knew she was coming over. So I had at least 2 ideas in my mind. So she came to me and goes, "Can we do an art project?" I was like, "Yeah." And so we did the first rainbow scratch page together. And then I just gave her 2 more sheets to have a good time with. She occupied herself for half an hour while her mom and I were able to catch up. All of this without screens, right? Now, that doesn't mean she doesn't also have her iPad time. So alternative activities, having them on rotation with novelty. And last but not least, when you build screen time into the routine, every kid has sort of their dosage, and that dosage can change on the weekends, the weekdays, the summer, and the school year. So if they're spending long days in school, that's really different than being long days at home. So our screen time expectations might adjust, but you have to sometimes experiment with that to see what fits the best. What I would say, though, is involve the kids in your decision making. Let them know why it's different and what you're trying and what signs you're going to be looking for that it's working or not working. Now, your 5 and 6-year-old, if they're starting to get to this point where they want to earn that or figure out how to game it and access that screen time. You might even couple it with things like, well, when I see that when you get home, you're able to, put your things away and sit down and have a snack and do your reading, and it all goes smoothly, then I know it's a good evening to still have screen time. If you come home and you refuse to eat snack, or you're kind of all over the place and you're whining and complaining and melting down, then I'm going to probably say, screen time's not going to be an option this evening. So you can bring it in there without it being a reward or a punishment, but just a logical concept, a logical sort of result or consequence of what you're seeing. And that way you can motivate kids to sometimes build up other healthy habits before they have their screen time. Now, they're in the age range where it might be applicable to have no screen time or junk food on the weeknights. Like, just don't even, it's not even on the table. It's a non-negotiable. And instead you can leave it for the weekends. And that's something you might consider too, Kaya. So a lot of ideas here. And then for those of you who are listening with older children, you can really start to talk a little bit more about how, having them really notice, how do you feel after an hour of screen time? How do you feel after an hour of maybe 7 or 8 different activities, including screen time? And when does it make the most sense to have it then, depending on how you feel? Like, oh, I always feel tired afterward. Okay, so maybe this is something we can do as we're winding down. But does it make sense to do this in the middle of the day? I don't know. Probably not. Maybe we should get outside, right? So you can start to have these conversations with kids as they turn like 6.5, 7, and even more as they get older. Eventually, you're going to need to give them a lot of leeway to make some, mistakes, or maybe mistakes isn't the right word, for them to understand what their proper dosage of screen time is. And that you can experiment with more on the weekends and the summers as they're like 10 years and older. That's when kids start to kind of go, okay, it's true. If I only do video games for a whole day, I do feel crappy at the end and tired and, this and that, grumpy. And you give them an opportunity to try it out and see what the effect is. And then from those observations, you can create new boundaries together. So those are some ideas around it. This is a very big topic. I plan on doing an entire piece on this. So we have that to look forward to. Some of my initial thoughts from this topic. So glad you asked the question. Really good question. If you have a follow-up question or thought, please put it in the chat around what you've seen work well for your family, or what stood out to you about the tips I gave. Please put it in the chat. Let these folks know who are asking these questions what's standing out to you, and maybe some additional ideas. I always like to do that with my clients on our group calls. Okay, great. Kai, if you have more questions, let me know. Put them here or reach out to me. I'm here. I'm available. You can always DM me on Facebook if you're in my group, or drop a comment, and we always get notifications for those on YouTube for folks who are listening there. This next one is from Margo. So Margo says, my oldest child is a 3-year-old who won't play by himself and constantly needs someone to play with him, which can be a lot of demand on you. I understand. Margo says, I also have a 2-month-old and I'm struggling to find balance. How do I make sure the needs of my 3-year-old are met while simultaneously caring for a small infant? Okay, so similar to what I just spoke about, there's a lot you can do around making sure your inner game is really strong around why you're insisting that you get some space and time with your 2-month-old, and helping your 3-year-old understand that. But it's going to be very limited because of how old your child is. So it's more about you knowing why and being clear about that. That's going to help you to actually execute a plan where you slowly and surely help your 3-year-old spend time with you across it. First it could be 10 feet away, and then it's across on the other side of the room, and then it's even in another room. And you can, what I call, scaffold and help create kind of tolerance for this time apart while still in the same building. 3-year-olds are often, I think of them as like love buckets. If you fill them up with a lot of attention and give them a lot of energy, sometimes they can be like bottomless buckets, and they want more and more and more and more. However, you can have a rhythm going with them where you fill up their bucket with time, attention, energy. You really pay attention to where they kind of lose themselves in activities. And just like I was mentioning about alternatives to screen time, you can find activities that they will immerse themselves in. And what you'll want to do is scaffold how long you kind of step away and leave them with the activity before you, check back in with them or before they can bring it to you. So here's one example. Let's use making art. So you can imagine, I have 15 years of classroom experience, 5 of them in preschool. So very often I would have 12 or 24, sometimes even 36 kids, split amongst a couple of teachers. And some of the kids want our constant attention. But we're not just sharing it with the 2-month-old, they're sharing that attention with, say, 11 other kids. And so we literally cannot be available at every moment for every kid. So we'd have to build up their tolerance to waiting, to doing an activity nearby, but not necessarily having your attention the whole time, to not having full body contact with you at all times, because some kids seek that. So I'm always thinking about how can I meet this need that's where it's not my body or my full attention that's going to meet that need. And so sometimes I would think of it as this kid really needs something to settle them down. I used to call it an anchoring activity. This child needs to be anchored into an activity that is satisfying enough to their senses, satisfying enough to their intellectual curiosity, to anchor them so that they feel comfortable being with and kind of communing with the material or the activity or that, space or maybe that animal or something without my input. And so I would start with, okay, let's rotate through these 3 activities and have this child do them right next to me. And using artwork as an example, used to be draw a line. Look, I made a line. Okay, draw this. That's a cat. And then draw, now a cat's eating grass. Look, there's a tree. Now I do this. Now I do that. Now I do that, right? And you can see how this is just constant attention. And if I have 11 other kids or you with your 2-month-old, my gosh, I used to say you're trying to eat my brain and brain snacks. So like little brain eaters, because there's only so much of you to go around. And so a reasonable response from the environment, I always say to my clients, what would be a reasonable response from the environment? Well, this child needs to learn that not just because an adult is in the room, it doesn't mean that that adult is available at all times and is interruptible at all times. So without abandoning them or rejecting them, I let them know that I'd be delighted to see the picture when they have filled in, let's say, this section. Starting with section. Okay, well, and we kind of talk it through. What do you think you're going to draw then? Oh, I'll draw some trees and some flowers. Okay. And then just kind of babbling about it. And you're like, great, go for it. And when this whole part is filled in, then bring it to me, and then show it to me. So instead of one line, look, I say, okay, if that's where you're at, then we're going to start with a little piece of the page. And sometimes I'd even draw a little line with a pencil. Okay, when this is all filled in, then we'll talk about it. Oh my gosh, great, you did it. And then give them some time to talk to you. Okay, now let's do the next part. Give it back. You're structuring the pacing and the rhythm of your interactions with something that's concrete and real that they can see. It worked so well. 95% of the time, it really helped the child settle in. They have a little goal, they're doing a little thing, and then they bring it to you. So using that as an example, as a template, where else could you do that? You could do that with stacking something, building something. When the tower gets this tall, come get me and I'll come take a look, right? And then I always would increase it. So this one child I'm thinking about in particular with the art projects, and I remember the cat, the tree, that example. Eventually I was able to say, let me know when you filled the whole page and there's no more white space on the page when they're doing like painting. Okay. And they'll just immerse themselves and they would spend a full 5 to 10 minutes, which was a big deal for this kid who was like every 5 seconds, and into the project, and started to feel just more secure and settled in themselves and in the activity, which was huge. So I would run with that quite a bit in as many directions as you can with as many different kinds of things as you can. Another thing you can do, this is one more idea for you, Margo, and then we'll move on to the next one, is you can involve them in a role with your 2-month-old. Have them hold the container of wipes for you. Have them hand you one at a time. Ask them to like play with a toy above the baby, so while the baby's getting changed. Ask them to gently pet their arm while you breastfeed. Like, whatever it might be. Or maybe they could be in charge of turning the white noise machine on and off, or, thinking about things that are happening and having them turn into sort of mama's helpers without necessarily telling them that they're, playing this whole role, or maybe do if you think they would really rise to it. It's amazing how much 3-year-olds want to have kinetic activity. So it could even be, can you go into the kitchen and find me the shiniest, smoothest spoon that you can? You don't really need this, whatever. And then you take the spoon and then you do something random with it, like gently put it against the baby's face to help the face cool down. And say, I think she likes how it feels on her cheeks. Whatever it is, give your child, your 3-year-old, all of you out there, give your children purposeful activities where they can be engaged, they can support, and they can help. Oftentimes we separate parent work and kid work, and we don't realize there's actually a lot of overlap there. I recently was talking to a family who may or may not be listening about involving their kid a bit more in like prep and cleanup in the kitchen by putting in a step stool and having him up on counter level. And maybe you could even just make up a potato scrubbing job. Have a bunch of these nice big russet potatoes and one of those little potato brushes in a nice like tray or bowl, and just have them scrub it and scrub off every little bit of dirt that they can. Oh my gosh, they love scrubbing, right? All this time and energy, scrub, scrub, scrub. Oh, make sure we do the other side. Oh, let's do the edges, right? And then they have this thing they're doing, and I'm doing it for a while, right? And you can see like, okay, I give him feedback every 30 seconds, and that seems to go well. But now let's try to stretch to 45 seconds or to a minute or to 2 minutes. And then eventually, maybe I can even set him up at the table in the other room and ask him to do all of the potatoes before he comes, or the entire potato before he brings it to me, so I can give him the next potato. And then you've got this child in there busy, involved, developing themselves 3 to 5 minutes all on their own. So you can work up to it. Okay, Margo, I hope that was helpful too. Let us know in the chat. Okay, let us know what stood out to you. All right, and we got someone here on Facebook. So if you can, say hello in the chat, and we'll have a chance to, in the comments, have a chance to say hi to you. All right, here's another question we've got from Marta. Marta would like to know about her son, who's 4. She says, my son is extremely shy, and this sometimes blocks him from participating in activities. What can a solo mom like myself do to help him overcome his shyness and become more self-confident? I love this question. I have several clients right now who have children that they would say, yeah, it's mostly shyness that is going on with, like, they're very kind of tentative. Maybe they can really express themselves at home, but as soon as they're in public, they tend to shut down and hide behind and kind of refuse to try new things or talk to new people. Maybe we've had family members visiting and they are shy all of a sudden and don't want to talk, and you're worried that the person that visited doesn't feel very welcome and isn't being hosted very graciously, and then maybe won't bind with your kid and will feel hurt. All these things are wrapped up in shyness. But there are 2 different ways that I like to think of shyness, through 2 lenses. I think of it as a version of anxiety where there might be some worried thinking. And when that happens, there's a body component, a physiological component, and there's a cognitive component that we need to help the kids work through and kind of build up some tolerance to exposure to these events that make them feel shy. I like to think of it that way. And there's also this thing that's called selective mutism. And you might want to look into that, selective mutism. I've helped several clients who they've identified, yes, my child is definitely in that selective mutism kind of category, in terms of like how little they want to speak, even in their classroom, even after months. And there are a lot of great tips out there, and I've shared them with my clients too, about like to share with the educators actually, about things like give the child nonverbal ways to communicate, like squeeze your hand or use a hand signal, right? Using sign language even. And so that's something you can look into, giving your 4-year-old ways that he can communicate that doesn't force him to verbalize, because at 4, a very common thing is they just go quiet. The voice gets tucked away. So if you can give him another way. Another thing you can do is you can have him whisper in your ear and you can speak. And you always ask for permission first, obviously. Hey, so-and-so would like me to tell you. Yeah, my child would like to say this to you, and he's just not finding his voice right now, but he really wants you to know that he's happy to see you, for example. So you can do that. Another thing you can do is just make it okay for a while for him to be right for him to be side by side with you as you model the kind of conversations, the kind of greetings, the hello and back and forth, without putting him on the spot to verbalize. And when you work with it, when you work with the shyness, they tend to want to lean on you more, and they actually end up opening up more. And this is a good thing. It's a good thing that they're leaning on you, because what you're doing is, coming back to scaffolding, is you're sort of building up a ladder towards their independence where they feel more comfortable. So that's on the skill side. That's the selective mutism side, some alternatives you can bring in there. Now, to address the exact anxiety, there's some things you can do. So you can disrupt worried thinking, which is a cognitive activity. It's just something that we can be kind of ruminating on, either from the past experience projecting into the future, or we can have projected worried thinking where we're thinking about the future and we're running through scenarios and our mind is really busy trying to keep us safe with these worried thoughts. If that's happening, it does help to give reassuring information and to what I like to call preview as much as possible. What can they expect? What's happening? How they can have a safety net if they do get nervous. And so I would often be reassuring about what is safe about the situation, what might be enjoyable about the situation, and permission to participate at the minimum level. So whatever that minimum level is, I would try to pick the minimum level that doesn't blow out their nervous system. And what I mean by that is, here's an example. I had a child who was really scared of dogs, and it's actually not too far off from being scared of new people or new situations. And so the minimal exposure event that we could create was that he could, at the beginning, was that he could look out the window to watch the dogs next door playing. And then once he was able to work on his coping tools and get his nervous system calm in that situation, we moved to being in a park where there's a dog really far away on the other side of the field. And then we moved towards interacting with a friendly dog we know who's on a leash, and you don't have to touch a dog, but you're within, 10 to 20 feet of the dog, and so on and so forth. So I would be planning ahead, previewing, saying, it's okay if you want to stand by my side and just whisper in my ear what you want to say, and I can be your voice while we're there. If you start to feel shy, if you start to feel nervous, I'm happy to do that with you. Last but not least, you want to bring in something that helps them to soothe themselves. So sometimes kids need to close their eyes and take a breath while they're being held. So you get three things there: reduction of stimulation, breathing that helps the heartbeat lower and tells the nervous system you're safe, and then maybe some deep pressure with a hug or holding. If your child is a clinger, then cling them back and rub their back with a deep pressure, slowly, calmly, reassuringly, right? For example. So Marta, to really do this right, we have to talk more. Like, I want to hear how does he react to the situations? Does he go quiet? Does he cling? What is his exact sort of reaction? So let's see what we can come with that. So let me know in the chat or comments, or Marta, contact me, reach out on, you can feel free to direct message me, and we can talk more about it. I also have complimentary 30-minute sessions for folks who would like to get some coaching with on something specific, and I'll have you check out your parenting strengths with my parenting strengths quiz too. So that if that's of interest, I'll drop a link to that in just a moment here. All right, we're going to move on to Christine Moreno. Now, Christine Moreno says that she has a 5-year-old daughter, and she says her 5-year-old daughter is very independent and always wants her way. So you've got a very strong human in your presence, it sounds like. Oh, we love the strong ones. So with your strong 5-year-old, it sounds like Christine would like to encourage her independence while at the same time setting solid boundaries. This is good. These two go together actually quite well. And the reason why I would say they go together quite well is that a lot of times the reason why the child is wanting her away all the time is because she wants to understand how she can be powerful in the world. And so she's testing boundaries to find out what is that like upper limit, and that she can kind of start to groove in when she finds it. So you've got your work cut out for you, Christine, and anyone else out there who has a strong-minded child. But in some ways, these are my favorites. I used to call my dragons because they would just come up and they blow fire at a thing to see if it's set on fire. That's just kind of how they do. And they push and push, right? So you're going to want to notice where the power struggles come up the most. And so, and to come up with, I would say, three kind of, I would say, powerful ways of reflecting back to her that she is a powerful person, and that something about the way she wants power makes sense to you. And this is hard. I just have to name it. This is hard, but it's incredibly impactful when you do it well. I can recall with my little dragons, all the different kids that have been in my world that are very strong-minded, how powerful it would be when I say, oh, this seems really important to you. And you really want this to happen, and you want it to happen now. And it's not easy when you hear someone say no. Even just that, you've started a new conversation. That's just one example. Another might be, you have such a strong vision of how this should go. It must not make much sense to you right now why everyone won't just do their part to make your vision happen. I can see how that would be upsetting. So the trick here is you're not making their power or their wish for power and control and independence and all the things you mentioned wrong. And then you have to break the news to them that they're only 5, but you don't have to say that, that they have limited life experience. But again, you don't have to exactly say that. You could say, I wish it was different. I wish we could have everybody stop what they're doing and just do this the way that you wanted to be done, because you have a good idea here. Unfortunately, and this is where you got to fill it, you have to just sort of fill them in on how life works. Unfortunately, and sometimes this is where humor comes in. Unfortunately, other people have other ideas of how they want to spend their time. And in order for us to be respectful to them, we have to let them continue doing what they want to do right now. However, what if we try and set aside some time for this idea and actually invite people and see if we can, get some interests. And they can start to get a sense of what it's like to try and lead a new initiative at work, or even, before that, how to initiate a new game on the yard, or how to make something happen on a play date that they were really hoping would happen, that their friend shows up and wants to do something else. I mean, these are life skills we're helping them with. I would really lead with that empathy. This is one of the top rules of emotion coaching. When the kids start to get into their power struggle, get hard-headed, you don't want to fight with the feeling. You want to go with it as much as possible. Don't make it wrong, and help them to adjust their expectations of what's going to happen next. That's a big broad strokes example, because you definitely gave me more of a general topic here, Christine, but I'd love to hear if there are specific examples. Again, the quiz and the strategy session are available to you, complimentary. And, if it's a good fit to work together, we can, but there's also, this is a gift to you. So you will get some coaching, and I'll only check in with you towards the end if you'd like to continue talking about working together. So this is like one of those low risk, no obligation, truly complimentary sessions. So if this is a question you don't feel resolved by this answer, and it's still something that's changing your dynamic and your relationship or impacting daily life, please don't hesitate, friends. That's what they're here for. And I just put some time on my calendar that hopefully will work for you all. At the very least, take the quiz, and then you can learn a little bit more about your parenting strengths and some areas you might focus on next. All right, we've got Marley next. So Marley says, the hardest thing about parenting my 5-year-old is that it's hard to know the best way to respond when he disobeys or his behavior needs correction. Great. All right. That's right. I stacked this question after Marta's, because it's like, okay, great. I've got some ideas of how I might respond, but what do I do when lines are crossed? Because oftentimes when kids are trying to, oh, not Marta's question, sorry, it's Christine's. When kids are really trying to assert their personal power, they will also dig in and disobey, and even do things that are out of bounds, like we said, behavior that needs correction. So Marley and many of us would like to know, what are some strategies for responding to difficult behaviors in a healthy way? Good question. I love this. This is such a good one. All right. So what would I say about that? Marley, I think with your 5-year-old, along with what I was shared with Christine about finding something that makes sense about it so that you can hopefully give voice to the message that's behind the behavior. I used to think of myself as really good at pulling back the curtain so the curtain is the behavior, and what's behind it is like the need, the unmet need, or the goal that's behind the behavior. And I've also coined this term that I say all the time to my clients, which is all behavior is communication. I'll say it again. All behavior is communication. Especially if it's done in front of you, but even if it's not, like I went into your room and I broke your favorite necklace, there's a message, right? So when you say disobey, or when you say behavior that needs correction, I get curious right away about what are those behaviors and what do you think your child is trying to communicate through those behaviors? Are they trying to let you know that their feelings are hurt? Are they trying to let you know that you don't have any power over me? Are they saying, pay attention to me? Are they saying, I don't know what to do with myself right now, so I'm going to flail around and do all these things, and I'm not really paying attention to whether or not these behaviors are okay? Is it, I'm hungry, I'm lonely, I'm tired, I'm angry, right? Like, what is coming through it? And the reason why we have to do this is because kids don't know how to interpret their own behavior very well. And it really doesn't start until about 7.5, sometimes a little earlier, but on average, when they're able to actually take perspective outside of themselves, which helps them to also truly empathize, also helps them to self-observe. So that's why we imagine a 4-year-old who goes, I think I'm being mean to my sister because I'm hungry. Usually we're like, whoa, that was advanced, insightful, right? And there are kids who do that and can do that, at least intermittently, occasionally. It's more in the exception, right? If you've heard a 4-year-old do that, you would be impressed. And that's because it's not really within reach in most moments for most 4-year-olds or 5-year-olds or 6-year-olds even to do that. So we need to help them. And oftentimes they will reject our idea, but you can go forward as if it's true anyway. Take your best guess. I think this child is reaching for some personal power. How can I give them some personal power right now? I've been pushing them through their routine for the last 40 minutes. Maybe I need to just sit down for a second and listen to what they need right now, or what they have to say, and give them some choices so they feel like they have more power, and they feel like I'm really listening to them, so they don't feel so pushed around. Maybe I can put them in charge of telling me what to do for 5 minutes, and then they can have a turn being the boss for a little while. Maybe we can go look at the routine chart and let the routine be the boss, and we can both go, oh, shoot, too bad there's not a lot of time left, but at least we could read one book together, side by side. So whatever I would do, whatever you can do to get on the same side of the issue that you guess at, you'll get better at it over time. It takes practice, but you will be able to start guessing what is going on. I've seen Kirsten do it at the dinner table with her daughter, with her son. They've been working with us now in this work for 8-9 months, and I witnessed it firsthand. Oh, are you trying to move your body right now, right? Or looks like you'd like to switch to an art project, things like that. I'm not quoting you directly, by the way, Kirsten, but things like that, where you kind of take your best guess, or you just move forward as if it's true and see if it helps. Now, last but not least, and there's so much more I want to say about this. I teach on boundaries and limits and setting up routines that stick and all kinds of skills all the time. But does your child already know what the expectations are? And if your child knows what the expectations are, do you know why they exist? And does your child know why they exist? And the last part is, do they know what will happen if they do follow the expectations or if they don't? Sometimes we know in our heads why this expectation is there, and we have a little bit of an idea of what's going to happen if they don't follow the expectation, which maybe is just get mad at them or it's something, a specific consequence. I would take your top 3 sticky sort of behavior points and get clear on what happens when they do it, or what happens when they follow expectations and when they cross the line into this behavior. Make sure you know what it is, make sure they know what it is, and do your best to follow through. Now, a lot of parents don't have experience with this. And I remember being a new teacher and I had all these little children and I was supposed to be helping uphold the rules and regulations and expectations and boundaries. And luckily I had mentors to watch and see how they did it. And then also some elder kids I could check in, like, what is the rule about the tire swing exactly? That sort of thing. However, we don't necessarily have those people in our environment when we're parenting at home. We're kind of making it up as we go. So that's where things like community coaching, having those family huddles or meetings, even just with your co-parent or with a thought partner, like how we have accountability groups in my world, and just thinking through like how do you respond when your child, dumps something out on purpose, or your child refuses to, help out with cleaning up the table. Like, what do you do? And then start to build up your sort of game plan that your child also knows about. And you can even in the moment then do something like this. Oh, sweetie, are you really gonna leave your plate on the table? Is that the choice you're making? And then usually right away they're like, oh no, because they know if they don't put the plate away, they don't get dessert, or like they're going to have to make up that time later that they had you work, whatever the consequence is. And you get to say something like, okay, but you know what this means, right? And they do. They know what it means. You're already on the same page. Like you have that, and I know kind of rapport. When you get there with your kids, it just feels like a completely different relationship. And I've done that with my students. It takes time. It took me about 10 to 12 weeks to get there with almost every kid in the class. And some kids it took half a school year, just because of how many that we had to get through to the place where we could get to the, and I know kind of spot. And it's worth it, because then you're not spending most of your time talking about like correcting and having to manage and work through conflicts and constantly be vigilant about when are they going to act out next. Like you start to shape things in a direction that's so much more pleasant, and you have a lot more teamwork. And that's not to break their spirit or something. It's actually to amplify it and let it like help them find that groove I was talking about, where they're still really themselves, but it's like they get to be powerful in ways that work for everybody else. And they'll still mess up, they'll still make mistakes, but you'll have this moment of, oh, sweetie, really? Is that where we're going? And it's everything for your nervous system too. Like it's so soothing when you're able to have that kind of rapport with the little ones. So 5 is not too late. 5 is a great age to do this. They really are asserting their independence, their voice. They want more autonomy. They want more say. They're starting to notice what other kids have or don't, it's a good time to get started. And for those of you who have kids younger, start as soon as you can. And those that are older, just know you can backfill this stuff and just pick one thing at a time. Okay. All right. Love these questions. Okay. I've got a few more. So this one is a little bit of a shift. We've got Ramona, who is a grandparent who's raising 3 grandkids, 7, 9, and 10. That's a beautiful gift you're giving those children, of giving them your round 2 of parenting, Ramona. What a big heart you have. Just wanted to acknowledge that first. And Ramona says, do you have any specific advice that might help guide me as their grandparent? Well, everything that we do as parents and caregivers, it's not generationally specific, right? So it's like everything that I've said today, I wanted to just reassure you, Ramona, still applies as a grandparent. And I think the part that I don't know about your family history and situation is whether or not there are co-parents, if there are other caregivers involved besides maybe like school, teachers and things like that, people like that. So without knowing your specific situation, Ramona, I would say that if you're spending 15 to 30% of their caregiving time with them, you are one of their main caregivers, or more. And so you need a voice at the table. And if you're their primary caregiver, then you have the advantage of, reflecting back on what worked and what didn't work with the previous generation, with their parental generation, and now applying it to these little ones. But you also have the disadvantage of having some bias of, kind of a generational difference. Like, kids are different, schools are different now. So it's not the easiest place to be in. And then you're also dealing possibly with your own, needs as you continue to mature and grow older. So it's a tough spot to be in, but it's also such a gift to be able to be involved. So I would say, make sure that you're counting your voice in and weighting it properly. And I would stick with basics first when you're talking to other caregivers. Things like, what are our thoughts and feelings and policies about food, about rest, about language, about screens, about school, and see if you can align some of your goals in those foundational pieces first. Safety, of course. And then I would have projects. Like right now with the 7, 9, 10-year-old, we're working on setting aside time for homework, finishing that homework and turning it in on time. That's our project right now. Or we're working on making sure they have other interests outside of screen times and video games. Or another might be, we're trying to establish some healthy habits around sleep, hygiene, and food. Pick projects, work those through. That'll be a big help, especially with intergenerational families, multi-generational families. And then another one that I've really seen make a difference is to agree upon what language you're going to be using to describe how your family makeup might be different from another family. And this goes with two household families, single parent families, donor egg, donor sperm babies, right? Adopted children, like folks, anything that is sort of not the common narrative, which is actually, if you add up all those folks, there's more people who are not doing the one household hetero, classic birth journey, kind of conception and birth journey. Very few people actually meet that sort of how things go story these days. So there's more exceptions added up together than there are people who meet that. But unfortunately, that is it's overly represented, let's just say, in stories and in sort of how things should go. So if you're working with that, then you need to provide really clear, really grounded language that's not necessarily negative about how things are. So of course you can be realistic too and say there's benefits and there's drawbacks, and you can have with a 7, 9, and 10-year-old, you can talk that through. And even with young kids, you can say, you might have noticed that our household is different than, and I would use a real life example, than this household or than the one in this book or that movie or whatever, right? And give them a story, like give them an origin story that's age appropriate, that they can handle, that they have the capacity to cope when they hear it. Let them help them come up with language so that when families that look differently than yours ask questions, you can be really clear, like they have a real clear sense of how to represent themselves and their family. That's a very empowering thing. So I wanted to bring that up to you, Ramona, since you let us know that you're raising your grandkids. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. We'd love to hear from you about your takeaways. So last but not least, we've got a nice closing comment here. Really, more than anything, it's not much of a question, I would say. And I love it. I love that it's not really much of a question. This is from Amanda. And what I want to say to Amanda is good on you. I love that you have this perspective. She says, I try not to look at parenting as hard, though I would say that the hardest part of parenting is remaining aware of all the different ways to help support her healthy development. How do I keep on top of all these different parenting strategies? Yeah, Good. Okay. And again, good on you. It's hard to even try to keep up with all the parenting stuff out there. I don't know about how about you, but even like when I was starting out as a teacher, gosh, there's just so many like methods out there. And I did end up picking Montessori because that was the professional environment I found myself in and that I resonated with, having been a Montessori kid for a year and a half. So it felt like coming home, and the kids were just so busy and purposeful with their little jobs and, generally getting along, at least that seemed like, much more than I expected. So I did kind of go with the Montessori method of educational teaching, but when it came to relationship building and social emotional growth and social skills, there are a lot of opinion in parenting. There are a lot of opinions out there. So then I was stepping into becoming a parenting coach and parent mentor. And I thought to myself, well, I don't really like the idea of subscribing to one method. I borrow from all these different methods, and I don't give the same families, or I don't give different families the same advice. I do give a big tool set that tends to be universally applicable to some extent, as long as you customize it to each family. So what I would say is pick a mentor and maybe 3 reliable sources that you'll look at consistently, and consider those sources as suggestions. And be wary of method-based parenting advice. Take it with a grain of salt, because here's what I think. It's kind of edgy. We got to this end of this part of the video. You get to hear the real from Vanessa. Kirsten's here. Hey. As I've been looking into for myself, launching a podcast and publishing a book and things in the future, TED Talks, things like that. What I'm noticing is that methods sell books, but they don't fix big problems. And big problems is not even the right way to put it. They don't offer a holistic approach to parenting that is customized to a family's needs. Every family is different. Kids are different at different ages. They're different temperaments. There's no one size fits all approach to parenting. And anybody who's trying to tell you that they found it, I'd be cautious about sticking to their advice. I would be considering it a tool in your toolbox instead of the way that things are or should be. Does that make sense? Okay. So wanting to put that out there. So what I would say is only in the end, only you know what's right for you and your family. And it's okay to patchwork different methods, like tools from different methods into a plan, and get help organizing that if that's what you'd like. I mean, that's what people like me are dedicated to. We want to help you organize your efforts so that you have a plan and you feel comfortable with that plan and you make progress. And if you're not making progress, we do something about it right away and figure out a new plan with the new information we have, and we keep building on that. Yeah. There's a reason why any other really important career path or like role that we play has mentorship built in. Residencies for doctors, right? Hours and hours and hours of experience for therapists before they get their certifications. There's a reason why, even for like, we don't leave our kids in a classroom with a teacher who has no training. Why is that? It's because we know that it's very hard to just pull together what you need to show up for kids properly. And I think it's a very dangerous myth that parents can just figure it out as they go. Why would we do that to ourselves and to each other and to parents who already are taking on one of the most important things they'll do in their life? Like we won't even touch the parts of our car without reading the manual or watching a YouTube video or trying, like, a lot of us will bring them to the mechanic, but we'll tinker away at our kids without having like backup and a team and a mentor. And I just think it's unfair. I have no judgment for parents who want to DIY parenting at all. More power to them. And if you're struggling or you feel like you resonate with this, like, hey, hold on. Why is this a societal expectation that I'm sort of being pressured to feel like if I need to get support and help with parenting, there's something wrong with that? Because banish that idea. That's a dangerous myth. And it's about time we change the narrative on this and empower parents to get the tools and strategies that we already do our best to get into the hands of educators and social workers and therapists. It doesn't make sense to leave the parents out of that conversation. So I would say get into spaces where you feel empowered and you leave with tools. And sometimes that's a program like mine, or it's a Facebook group like this, or it's joining a group of people who are doing something similar. Whatever works for you. I want you to know that you deserve that and it's out there for you. All right, with that, I will close. Thank you for listening. It's something I feel very passionately about. And hopefully it's giving you some sense of power and agency to do it your way and continue to gather good tools and find the spaces and places that help you to stay on your path and create the family life that you want to your children. It's been so fun to be here on Zoom. Thanks for attending. Thanks for listening. Let us know what you've gotten out of this. And until next time, be well. You are a calm, empowered parent working towards raising confident, healthy, and happy kids. We see you, we love you, and we're here for you. So let us know what you need. And until then, lots of love. Take care.